to the Midweek Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. So very glad that you're able to spend a few minutes with us as we roll through the middle of the work week. And what a difference 24 hours makes, right? Yesterday we were watching winds knocking over utility poles. I saw a couple of fence panels in my neighborhood that were knocked down by the events of Mother Nature of the last 36 hours or so. Beautiful sunshine out there today, albeit a little chilly. But it looks like most of the power interruptions, at least in HRM, have been solved. They are still working. When I came to work on that site there on Bears Road where a couple of poles had snapped, it looked like they worked through the night on that to try and get those back. But the electricity is restored. The lights are back on in the studio today, which is a good thing. And we move on from yet another battle with Mother Nature. Alistair Alders, our meteorologist, sent me some data from that storm, and this was accurate as of about 6 o'clock this morning. Halifax at Windsor Park registered 92.6 millimeters of rain from that storm. In places like Kentville, 24 millimeters, Stewiacke, 39, Kejimkujik saw 50 millimeters of rain, but it looks like Halifax was kind of the target of the worst of that weather that we saw yesterday. As for the wind gusts, these are recorded all across the province. Up in Sydney, they saw a gust of 93 kilometers an hour. In Port Hawkesbury, 94, Grand Etang, 98. Bedford Basin, folks, saw a wind gust in the last 24 hours of 109 kilometers an hour. So there's a reason why some of those poles snapped and those fences were collapsed and everybody's garbage lids are in the next county. It was certainly a windy storm. Anyway, looking forward to enjoying some calm weather for the next couple of days. Looks like there may be some snow in the forecast in the form of flurries by the weekend. And, of course, Alistair will be here on Friday to bring us up to speed on what we can expect from that. There's been no doubt that the budget of a few weeks ago here in Nova Scotia has caught the attention of Nova Scotians, right? We've talked to a lot of different groups and individuals and organizations here on the show who were impacted by the Premier's decisions in those budgets. Of course, we watched the Premier pull a mea culpa and say that he got some of it wrong and apologized in the legislature, apologized right here on the radio on Friday for some of the decisions that were made, saying that his government will do better in the future. Nova Scotians not happy with the Premier in the wake of that budget. Angus Reid has released some new polling data this morning showing the approval of premiers across the country. And our Premier, Tim Houston, saw an 11-point drop in his popularity rating over the last quarter. Premier Houston now sitting at about 39% approval rating. The top performer in the country continues to be Manitoba's Premier. That's Wab Kinew. He is up 3 points. He sits at 61% approval rating. That's outstanding for any politician. And at the bottom of the list is Premier Ford, who is at 31%. He's down 3 points. And Francois Legault is in Quebec, of course, and he's the lowest in the country at 26% approval. In the synopsis of the data from Angus Reid, they write Nova Scotia is staring down a significant provincial deficit, but Houston's government will have to find other areas to save funds after backtracking on proposed cuts to services for people with disabilities, seniors, and visible minorities. His mea culpa not enough to reverse public opinion, and he sits at 39% support. We're going to do the open hour today at 12 o'clock. Right after we have a conversation with Clinton Wilkins as the Bank of Canada will make its decisions today. I'm going to ask you the question about these numbers, and I wonder if your opinion of Tim Houston has changed in the wake of this budget or the performance of his government over the last, we'll say, 3 to 6 months. Speaking of governments, the New Brunswick government released its budget yesterday. I think it was $1.4 billion in deficit this time around. New Brunswickers were bracing for pretty severe cuts. A lot of those cuts didn't happen, and it was very interesting to watch the reaction to this. Did you watch it on the Supper Hour News last night? I certainly did, and it was very interesting to see the opposition politicians calling out the government for not cutting enough. You don't see that very often. A couple of the nuggets, a pretty significant haircut to the public service, very much like here in Nova Scotia, was announced by the finance minister in New Brunswick yesterday. And one program of note that I think is going to impact you as a Nova Scotian listening to the show today is that that province, the province of New Brunswick, is going to put a toll booth up on the New Brunswick side of the New Brunswick-Nova Scotia border. And any non-New Brunswick plate, out-of-province plate, will be charged a toll. I couldn't find the actual number. Maybe it exists, but I couldn't find the actual dollar amount. Maybe somebody else out there has seen it, but it looks like when we travel, or if we travel to New Brunswick in the coming months, I don't think it's going to happen right away. I think they said they had to build the infrastructure first. That we're going to get dinged a toll in each direction. Kind of like it used to be for us at the Cobequid Pass, right? So I'm also going to ask you the question today at noon. Do you think that this move is and this is probably going to light up some New Brunswickers out there, and I can say this with a bit of a tongue in cheek, as I spent 6 years in Moncton on the radio there, but it feels like New Brunswick is cashing in on its reputation as being the drive-through province, isn't it? Like, there's no toll booth at the border with Quebec. Apparently there's some kind of federal legislation there that prevents them from doing that. I'd like to see that legislation. And there's no toll booth at the border with New Brunswick and Maine. But there's one, or going to be one, at the border with between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. I'm interested in your thoughts on that today as we roll along here on the program as well. Obviously, lots to talk about when it comes to the war in Iran. It continues to roll along. I was reading. It seems that the weekly, or the daily updates on what's happening there continue to roll along. There are still missiles being lobbed at nations in the Persian Gulf and close to the Persian Gulf from Iran, despite the continued allegations from the leadership of the United States that their military has been wiped out and their capability is diminished. I get it. It's probably diminished from where it was, but I'll tell you that places like Bahrain and Doha and Dubai have been knocking missiles out of the sky every day. So it seems that is continuing to go on. And still, I haven't seen a lot of nations stepping forward to aid with the blockade or the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which, as we talked about yesterday, is still very interesting to me. And it's a couple of emails on it yesterday, folks, and I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but it raised some interesting points. It's, we know that the world has been reacting, is that the right word, to the President of the United States and his take on fairness on the trade table and the tariffs and everything else, and maybe not as forthright as they would normally be in lending a hand to the Americans should they have asked. But I got an interesting email yesterday, I think it was from Rob, who said, you know what, this may also be pushback from the President of the United States not consulting with his allies before doing these kinds of major operations and catching them off guard. We know, same group that we were talking about earlier, Angus Reid put out some numbers on Canadians being vehemently opposed to any kind of military offensive operations in the Persian Gulf area or in Iran. I think those polling numbers are pretty consistent throughout a lot of the European countries that have been asked to help. But as I said yesterday, if this was 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, and United States president asked for help, people would be lining up to pitch in, they say, and we're just not seeing that this time around. And we'll have to keep an eye on what's going on in the Middle East. As I mentioned, Bank of Canada will make its interest rate announcement today. Most of the indications are that the Bank of Canada and the Fed in the United States are planning to keep their interest rates where they are, and there will be no movement. We're going to bring Clinton Wilkins in here right after the news at noon today to chat with him about what that means for you and for your mortgage and perhaps for your plans for home ownership moving into the future. If you were listening to any of the debate out of Ottawa this past week, you heard the housing minister saying that Canadians were holding off on buying homes because of the war in Iran. I don't buy that, and I don't think many of you buy that. But I'm going to suggest that if this thing carries on for much longer and we start to see prices continue to rise like we're seeing again today, I think that, Gregor Robertson's comments may come to fruition. I don't think it's happening right now, but I think that if we start to see energy prices get to the point where, I got to tell you, folks, you know that I drive a truck, right? And that was my choice, and I'm certainly not complaining about it, but I filled the tank up yesterday, and it was, what was it, $136, and it wasn't full. And again, I'm not complaining about it. That was my choice to purchase that vehicle and all of the things that come along with it. But if energy prices continue to rise, and if you were listening to our conversation with Patrick DeHaan earlier from Gas Buddy, that $200 a barrel oil isn't out of the realm of possibility. Obviously not going to happen overnight, but it isn't out of the realm of possibility. Just imagine what that tank of fuel is going to cost. And think of what that tank of fuel is going to cost for the fellas that are driving the big rigs on the highways, bringing all the stuff that we buy in. Took a quick look at oil prices before we came on the air this morning. Brent crude at $108 a barrel. That's up just under 5%. WTI crude is up just over 2%, sits at $98.18 per barrel American. And the all-important gas price, that went up 3% again today, folks. It's at $3 and was it 22 cents a gallon U.S.? That is one of the highest oil price or gasoline prices, and the pump prices in the United States are at points where we haven't seen for several years. So if the input costs of your daily excursions, to use all those fancy terms, if it keeps costing you a lot more to fill up your tank, and all of the groceries that we buy are going to see inflated prices, are you looking at buying a home now? Are you willing to get into the market? We'll ask Clinton those questions when we come back. And because we've been talking about doom and gloom and all of the ails of the province and the problems with the world, and John Gillis isn't available today at 11 o'clock, we managed to secure some time with our good friend and the former host of The Weekend Gardener. Niki Jabbour is going to join us at 11:30 today. And we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about planting your garden. I know with grocery prices getting to where they're at, you might be considering something like this, or maybe bringing back that COVID garden that you had. Niki Jabbour is going to join us as part of the show, and that's going to happen just after 11:30 today. We're going to take our first break here on the program. Very glad that you're with us today. When we come back, Atlantic Canada's energy security problem, a conversation with Research Fellow at the MacEachen Institute for Public Policy at Dalhousie University. That's Larry Hughes, and he'll be on the phone right after this break. All right, welcome back. Chat there before the break about what's happening in the energy markets, and the price of oil is up again today. It's fluctuating almost by the minute now. We're seeing ups and downs. Yesterday we saw a little bit of a decline in the price of oil. Then today it's back up again and up significantly, particularly Brent crude, which our next guest will tell you is kind of where we start to see our gasoline prices kind of mirror the movements in the price of Brent. It's up just over 4.2% today. Very pleased to welcome to the show to give us a little perspective on how this all matters to us, the research fellow at the MacEachen Institute for Public Policy at Dalhousie. That's Larry Hughes. Larry, how are you?
Very well, Dan, and yourself.
I am well, sir. I think that people have become almost armchair quarterbacks when it comes to the oil markets these days, given the amount of fluctuation in the market and all of those interrupter clauses that we've seen over the last 10 days to 2 weeks.
Oh, absolutely, and it's more than just quarterbacks. It's also it's hitting people in the pocketbook, and that's really where it hurts. Especially now, we're in, for many people in Nova Scotia and elsewhere, an affordability crisis.
Larry, we obviously people ask questions about why gasoline prices jump the way they do, and if we don't import a lot of oil from Saudi Arabia, why is this impacting North American prices so difficult? Why is that?
Well, we do import a lot of crude oil from Saudi Arabia. About 20% of our oil comes from Saudi Arabia, at least. This is 2025 numbers. And Nigeria was about the same. And the remainder, 50-60%, was from the United States. So essentially all of the vast majority of the crude oil that we refine, or that is refined by the Irving refinery in St. John, is imported.
And obviously that is where we get a majority of the gasoline we put in our cars.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's not just gasoline. It's gasoline, diesel, and that raises other questions. And heating oil for those people who are still, and it's a fair number of people in the province who are heating with oil.
Larry, with the ongoing war in Iran, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon, although anything can happen these days. That being said, are we at the point now where we're going to see oil continue to rise in price? And, can we get to that $200 a barrel?
I'm not really in a position to be able to talk about that. Not that because, as you said, things change from moment to moment. Just before the program started, when you mentioned this morning that I was going to be on the show, I jotted down the price of Brent, and it was $106 a barrel.
Yeah.
I checked just before Vanessa called, and it was $107.
Yeah.
So in the space of 45 minutes, it increased $1. That's just part of the problem. As it stands right now, what we're facing, this will become an energy security issue. In many respects, it already is for many people. When we talk about energy security, we're talking about two aspects: the supply of energy and its cost. And as it stands right now, the only thing of what we define as energy security, the only thing that is affecting people is the cost. We still have a supply of crude oil coming into the refinery, in St. John. If that starts to, I'll say, dry up, but if it gets curtailed because of what's going on in the Middle East, and it can't be replaced, then you're going to have an availability. There is going to be a supply problem.
Right.
So there will be two aspects of energy security, which will become a major problem.
There may be some listening, including myself, Larry, that can remember the embargo days of the late 70s and the energy crisis then and what happened, and gas pumps that were running dry and those kind of things. Is there potential for that happening here in Atlantic Canada?
I don't want to sound alarmist, but yes. If it got extreme like that, we do have Hibernia, and apparently Irving is talking to the people in Newfoundland running Hibernia, and talking about 500,000 barrels or whatever from Hibernia for April. Now the problem is it's not just the St. John refinery wanting this. There are lots of countries, refineries in Europe who have already got, who are already in the queue. So whether we could access that or not is another issue. I suppose if push came to shove, the federal government could declare that this is a national emergency and force the Hibernia people to ship crude to the Irving refinery. Another possibility is rationing, and I didn't realize this until this morning. I've talked about rationing, but that's another issue. I didn't realize this. The days in 1979, during one of the oil crises during the 1970s and early 1980s, the Canadian government was actually printing ration coupons so that people would be able to say, I can use this for so many liters of gasoline. So it's not unheard of. And I mean, if you go back far enough, and fortunately most of us have never gone through this, there was rationing in the Second World War.
Right, and we are seeing nations around the world, including Greece, already taking a look at rationing gasoline as this conflict rolls on. Larry, whenever we talk about energy security, I often hear from people that either are or have worked in Alberta, and we hear we produce, I think we're the fifth or sixth largest oil producer in the world when it comes to that kind of crude, but it's not as easy as just pumping it out of the ground in Alberta and refining it in St. John. It's a different kind of crude, right?
That's part of it. There are upgraders that would alleviate that, but that's just a tiny fraction of the problem. The bigger problem is, how do you get it from Alberta to St. John?
Right.
And you may recall in 2020, a tanker, and I wrote about this in the conversation, a tanker took crude from Burnaby in BC, round through the Panama Canal and up to the Irving refinery. So that is one possible route. There, of course, during a decade ago, there was the talk of Energy East and delays, the price of oil falling, and one thing after another. And TransCanada at the time, TC Energy now, pulled out and said, "That's it. We're not going to get involved with this anymore." So yes, Canada is, in total terms of oil, the fourth largest. And I suppose if Saudi stays shut down, I shouldn't laugh, but it will become the third. But we may have this oil, but if we can't get it here, we may as well not have it. So unless we can get oil to the Irving refinery from Canada, now there's also by rail, so there are other ways of doing it. Ideally, it would be a pipeline, but there are other ways if we have to. And as I said earlier, perhaps the federal government would step in and say, sorry, that oil has to go from Newfoundland and Labrador has to go to the Irving refinery.
Is rail too expensive to make any kind of profit on this?
Well, some 70 million barrels of oil are moved by rail every year in this country, so it's not unheard of, put it that way. But then again, if it's a national emergency and Atlantic Canada is facing shortages because the Irving refinery can't get the crude, you would have to have some way, and rail would certainly be a quick way of doing it. But remembering back to Lac Mégantic,
correct. Yep.
You would have to make sure that the line was safe, and there have been problems with it over the years.
Larry, as always, appreciate your time, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
That is Dr. Larry Hughes. He's a research fellow at the MacEachen Institute for Public Policy over there at Dalhousie University. It is sometimes crises like this create the environment for us to create new infrastructure, right? Energy East was certainly proposed when we saw oil prices very high. Energy East would make a lot of sense, I think. For our part of the world, would make a lot of sense, I think, for the oil patch in Alberta. But of course, there's a number of jurisdictions that Energy East would have to travel through that may not be as apt to having a pipeline come through their dirt, for lack of a better term. But if it is an energy crisis, then that might change the whole table. Time for us to take a break. When we come back, Halifax school librarians facing budget uncertainty now and think that some jobs could be in jeopardy. A conversation with Kristin Welbourn. When we return, you're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. Very glad you're able to spend some time with us as we get you into your Midweek Wednesday and rolling forward. We know that there has been a lot of discussion both at the municipal and at the federal or provincial level and the federal budget too that have dealt some led to some questions, I will say, with regards to a number of different organizations. And one of those groups here in HRM that is facing some uncertainty now because of decisions made at council is that of the school librarians. And there's some budget discussions, deliberations that are ongoing. We know the budget hasn't been passed yet, but this is creating a bit of a nervous time for the school librarians here in HRM. Very pleased to welcome to the program librarian Kristin Welbourn. Kristin, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
What's at stake here, Kristin? Are they cutting the budget entirely? Is it partially? What's the deal?
So, in the agreement between HRM and HRCE for supplemental funding, on page 28, they're is where they list us. They are eliminating 75.4 full-time equivalency positions from school libraries.
Holy smokes. That's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people, and it will affect a lot of our students.
Is it going to completely shut libraries down, or is it going to severely reduce what you can do for students?
I don't have an answer to that. We don't know what's going to happen. Wow.
Obviously, troubling times for you and your cohorts. That being said, what are the schools telling you?
That they're in negotiations with HRM, and they can't discuss it.
Wow. So maybe for people that haven't been in a school library for some time, Kristin, tell me a little bit about it. It's more than just putting books back on shelves.
It really is. School librarians have kept up with the times. So, of course, we do manage the book collection, and we read hundreds of books reviews every year. We purchase books every year that support the curriculum and support what students want to read, and so that our students can see themselves reflected in the literature. But we program extensively with a focus on literacy. So we do, lots of people remember this from their childhood, scholastic book fairs. We do peer tutoring. We catalog and manage the Chromebooks. There's so much more. We help students navigate the internet. So here's how to evaluate this website. Look at it critically. What is the bias? Are they trying to sell you something? Is this a good place for you to do your research on this? We teach them how to use a database for their research. We're now trying to teach them how to use AI in a safe and appropriate manner.
Right.
So we're really more information specialists than just librarians at this time.
And school libraries are a place, a kind of a hub of the school. At least they used to be.
They remain that way. I see well over 200 students come through the library every day. It's a place for serious students to get work done. Sometimes it's a place to play a quiet game of cards. Sometimes it's a place to be safe. We provide a safe haven in busy schools.
Kristin, if they cut 75 positions out of school libraries in HRM, what kind of services can students expect to lose?
I would suggest probably all of them. Because school libraries are not spaces, they're the people who run them. They're
right.
us. And the research is there that anybody can do a quick Google search and see that the research supports school libraries in schools. So a full-time school librarian in a school raises literacy rates between 15 and 20%, raises graduation rates at 20%. And that's even more at our at-risk schools. So if you were to put a full-time librarian in one of our at-risk schools, you could raise those rates easily. So imagine taking the person out of that space, and those rates are going to drop. And what that means is we will have a less literate society, so that it'll be far-reaching. Less literate society, which will mean for people their socioeconomic status will fall. And probably when we have an educated society, their socioeconomic status raises, but their health is improved. All kinds of things are improved, and down the road, that would save money in healthcare.
Kristin, we know that schools are busy. They're full. They're crying for space. Do you think that this could be the next step to getting rid of school libraries altogether?
I don't know, but I certainly hope that they would never do that.
The budget obviously hasn't been passed. It's to be passed on the 31st. So I imagine you're lobbying your councillors and the mayor now to try and stop this.
We are, yes. And I would encourage anybody who's concerned about school libraries to call their councillor and the mayor. And if you want to support us, you could follow us on our socials, which is Save Our Librarians, and that's on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky.
Kristin, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Kristin Welbourn is a librarian here in HRCE. 75 positions now facing elimination within the school library system in Halifax as a result of some of the decisions made by City Council and the Mayor on the budget. I know that libraries perhaps aren't the libraries that I can remember, or maybe your parents can remember, where that's the only place that we had to go and get research and stuff done. Now computers and the internet have certainly taken over a lot of that research, and the AI is certainly doing that as well. If it's accurate, that's a different thing. But they're more than just this stacks of books and people that are telling you to be quiet, right? Libraries are central hubs, and it would be a shame if they disappeared, a resource that we already have that we're in danger of losing here in HRCE. Time for us to take another break. We're going to stop, and on the other side of it, the daycare workers issue in Nova Scotia continues to rage on. Daycare workers across the province now asking and calling on the government to release millions of dollars they say they're owed in back pay. Co-chair of the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Directors Association and executive director of the Needham Early Learning Centre, Janessa Williams, your guest when we return. All right, welcome back. This from the CBC's website. It reads, a union that represents some daycare workers in Nova Scotia says the province is withholding millions of dollars in wages dating back as far as 2 years. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, that's CUPE, estimates 3,500 early childhood educators across the province are owed an average of about $1,000 apiece, and about 200 of those are represented by the union. The province estimates retroactive wages are to be paid out, including benefits, will add up to about $12 million. I'm very pleased to welcome to the show today to give us a little bit of perspective on what this means is the co-chair of the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Directors Association and executive director over there at the Needham Early Learning Centre, and that's Janessa Williams. Janessa, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, no, very glad that you were able to spend I know you're busy, so spend a couple of days, a couple of months with us here on the show. Tell us a little bit about this, and as I understand it, the last time that I heard from the minister responsible was the line that, well, we're working on it.
Yeah, so the first that operators heard of this was on November 10th through a memo that we were getting wage increases, a 2.5 wage increase effective immediately with retroactive payments to April 2024. So those wage increases, the 2.5% was actually handed out on, I think it was November 14th. All ECEs received that 2.5% wage increase.
Okay.
They also, in that memo, told us there'd be another 2% in 26-27 and then another in 27-28. Fast forward a couple days, we received a second memo November 13th, which said that the details on the retro process will be shared in the coming weeks, with funding for retro pay provided to operators in the new year. No action is required from operators at this time.
Okay.
And Dan, that is kind of where we sit today. So we did have more communication in the new year, which was January 28th through a sector call. And they very quickly just went through why the raises are there, which was issued by the Treasury and Policy Board on November 10th under Section 14A of the Public Service Act. They let us know it was not specific to the childcare sector. Other government-funded entities were impacted and would be subject to the same conditions. Now, they said next steps that the department was working with government colleagues to determine how these adjustments will impact the sector, and they're targeting to have the details to share with licensees in the coming weeks. We're at March 18th.
Mm-hmm.
January 28th was more than a couple weeks or coming weeks ago. And this is where operators are sitting right now with no information on how it's going to be administered, what we as operators will have to do. I do agree with the minister, and I don't usually agree with the minister, but I do in this instance that it is an administrative nightmare. ECEs in Nova Scotia are classified by 3 different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, or untrained. And in this past 2 years, ECEs could have upgraded. They could have gone up a step on the scale. So all of that, literally when Minister McGuire said, like, we have to look at every hour, we do. We have to look at every hour of every ECE. So it is administratively heavy. Should it have taken this long? I'm not sure, in my opinion. I do know that in 2024, all childcare centres in Nova Scotia were onboarded with pension and benefits, but it's staggered. So April, June, October, and December of 2024, centres were onboarded, and the government does not have access to our payroll data or our pension and benefits data at this time. So it is my understanding through a form that came to operators last month in funding agreements, they're looking to have operators consent to share information regarding pension and benefits. It is my assumption at this time that is what that form is for them to gain access to maybe remove some of the administrative burden that will be placed on operators. I don't think we're going to get away scot-free with not having to do anything. But people are still waiting. People don't have any answers, and there's been no communication. So I think that is really the biggest thing right now is the fact that nothing's been said to anybody. We have ECEs that heard this in November that are waiting on these wages. I believe it's a lot more than $1,000.
Right.
I would say it's probably close to 2, maybe 3 for some people. So yeah, waiting 5 months with no information is not okay.
I would imagine
sure.
that the frustration it rises, and I mean, who couldn't use an extra $2,000 in their bank account, right? I know I certainly could.
Absolutely, and we have to also recognize that ECEs are still not making a living wage. Now, it's definitely improved with the Canada-wide transformation, but it's not great, right? It's not great yet. So having to wait for this money is difficult. It's difficult for operators who are also just struggling to get by in daily operations right now because the funding is just not flowing. Most of our funding in childcare centres comes after the fact. Like we report on funding for wages 2 weeks after ECEs have worked.
Okay.
We also wait on childcare subsidy a month after it's been claimed. So having to backpedal and then have this retro pay on top of it and not have any answers is very frustrating.
Have you or the organization or your group had a conversation with the minister responsible? Have you talked to Brendan McGuire?
So we have reached out. We've asked him to attend several of our business meetings, but we have not had any communication back. The MPDA executive, so myself, my co-chair, Stephanie Hiscock, and the secretary and treasurer meet pretty regularly with the department. Specifically, usually Pamela O'Coin is who we meet with. And these meetings are just basically based on our business meetings, and any questions members have or concerns, then we go back to the government, have these meetings, and bring the information back to our members.
Right.
So we did meet on February 6th, and we did ask the question, even though a week prior it was communicated in the sector call, and it was the same answer. It's complicated. It's administratively heavy. They didn't have a timeline, but they hoped to have something soon.
And soon in government speak can be a really long time.
It can be. Yeah, it can be a very long time. I'm hoping that operators get that information soon as to how we can help. I do think we won't hear anything till April. I've been in the sector for 15 years, right. And I know this time of year, not using it as an excuse, but it's fiscal year end. There's funding agreements to get out. There's inclusion support grants that need calculations, and that all requires humans to do it. So I know that is part of the reason why this is backlogged. But it's money owed to ECEs, and that should have taken a priority.
Janessa, how is that going to work when it, or maybe you don't know at this point, is it going to be, okay, here's the money that goes to this individual person that does the daycare provider pay that and then get reimbursed? Or does the government give them the money to give to the ECE?
Yeah, so historically, any retro pay that we have received from the department has usually been planned in advance. So we only find out about it once they have a plan. So this, I think, was caught off guard because it wasn't the Department of Education's plan. It got handed down because our wage scale is connected to public sector increases. So in the past, usually the department will send us a spreadsheet with all the information, how to gather it, what to give them. We send it back with a total, and they would then wire the money to us the same way they do all of our funding. So we have never had to pay upfront with our own funds before receiving funding from the government for retroactive wages.
Because that could be a big chunk of change, right?
Oh, I would be very surprised if any center could afford to do that right now.
Right.
That is funded by the government. We are pinching pennies, doing cash flows every month. We have operators that have waited 9 months for operational support, which is just not okay. If operators are reaching out for funding and support, it's because they need to buy groceries for the children to eat. It's because they've run out of paint. It's because they can't meet payroll because we don't get that funding until after the fact. There's so many factors that play into operating a childcare center, and being funded by the government is one more layer of struggle that we as operators have at this time to ensure that everything flows.
Is that what the trouble is, Janessa, when you're talking about these daycare, these childcare centers that are struggling week to week? Is that because of the government funding model? I mean, we all hear the stories about daycares being, full with waiting lists with lots of kids and those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, daycares are full, but that doesn't mean more revenue, because in 2021, when the Canada-wide agreement came into place, the department froze our childcare fees. So especially for nonprofit childcare centers, we always aim to keep our fees low, and always have before the Canada-wide agreement. So now you have some centers that were frozen. Let's say Center A was frozen at $32 a day. They're receiving a government fee reduction of $18.25 a day. So parents are only paying the difference of that $32 to $18.25. So those centers, we all know what happened since 2021. Nobody can afford anything anymore. Food has skyrocketed, which is our biggest expense other than staff salaries. We feed children a morning snack, lunch, and an afternoon snack, and we follow Canada's food guide. There is no processed food. There is no packaged stuff. Everything is real, and real food is expensive. So it's the centers that had a low childcare rate to begin with that are suffering the most right now. The government has put a discretionary grant in place, which is 6.1% of our childcare spaces, and it's not enough money. So their ask is that if it's not enough money, we apply for operational support. But the operational support application and process takes centers anywhere from 6 to 10 months to get that money. So it's just not flowing the way it needs to flow. And then where does the stress lie? On the shoulders of operators, who then have to call the department and say, I can't meet payroll today.
Right.
And that is not something that any employee should have to undertake when it's out of our control.
Not to mention waiting 6 months or longer for promised back pay. Janessa, I appreciate your time. I know you're extremely busy, and keep us in the loop, will you?
Awesome. Thanks. Great talking to you, Dan. Have a great day.
You too. That is Janessa Williams. She is a childcare operator, is the co-chair of the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Directors Association, and the executive director, I should say, at the Needham Early Learning Centre. Time for us to take a break. We're going to get an update on the news here at 11, including the Bank of Canada, which has held its benchmark interest rate at 2.25%, not to a surprise of many people. Dr. Gillis not available for us today. He is traveling, so we're going to bring in a bunch of pinch hitters, including our sports guy, Simon Bennett. Did you catch the World Baseball Classic final last night? What an outstanding baseball game. And Venezuela hoists the trophy. Simon Bennett when we come back. Welcome back as we carry on here on a Wednesday edition of the program. Sportsnet article on last night's final of the World Baseball Classic kind of describes what it is for those of us on the sidelines who are just starting to understand international baseball, because this is a new-ish kind of tournament, and it reads, like Canada in international hockey, the United States enters each classic expected to win. And after being accused of not taking early editions of the event seriously enough, they've gone to 3 straight finals. They beat Puerto Rico in 2017, but then they fell to Japan in 2023. And last night fell by a score of 3-2 against Venezuela. I know I watched it, and I know the next guest on the show watched it, and that is our sports guy in the morning, and that's Simon Bennett. Simon, how are you?
How are you? Hey, how are you, Dan? You know, it's interesting. I think you talk about the U.S. taking the tournament seriously as an organization. I would also counter that for all that the U.S. lost, and they'll be complaining about Aaron Judge and all that, I think Americans forget about this within 2 days, while Venezuela, as a nation, this is like a big celebration to them. Huge deal for some of the South American nations, including Venezuela, winning it. Like, seeing from Caracas, like, it was awesome to watch.
It certainly was. Given all of the geopolitical tensions that are in the world, that certainly was an undertone in this game.
Well, and especially, you know, the game was in Miami, but it was a very pro-Venezuelan crowd. And we can get into the politics and what happened earlier this year. That would take an hour. But, you know, like, the Americans weren't exactly hometown favorites last night, which might just talk about what people think about the U.S. right now generally, but also, I think, you know, and the way the population is distributed in the U.S., in the southern U.S. Like, it was interesting. Like, the Venezuelan crowd was awesome.
Yeah, the crowds have been obviously a sellout last night, but even in the preliminary stages of this event in Puerto Rico and around the world, the crowds have been pretty solid right throughout the whole tournament. Yeah,
they didn't have any games north of the border this year. I remember, I forget which WBC it was, but they were games at Rogers Center, and those were big too. And you know who was up there when the games were here way back? It was Canada and Italy. And look at what Italy did in this tournament. Like, you know, like, I think, but yeah, it was great to see, you know, the games in San Juan. Canadian fans will have great memories of the San Juan games and how successful they were there. I think it was for certain teams, you wouldn't have expected it was a big gain for them internationally as baseball looks to grow like hockey has in this country, like other sports have.
Simon, we talked about this when Canada advanced into the quarterfinals, about how important this is for baseball. We do know that there was some Blue Jay representation on the Venezuelan team. Andre Jimenez was there. This puts baseball, I think, in the front of people's eyes as we get ready to kick off the Major League season.
Well, and also, when we talk about the Canadian success and just, it felt like how the crowds were at Rogers Centre during the playoff run in October. It's almost like from a baseball mentality, we skipped a couple of weeks of spring training and went right back to that intensity. It'd be interesting to see how, guys like Jimenez, Vladdy go back to, all right, now you're sort of ramped up now, and now we're going back to March. Which might be, maybe they have a great start to the season because they're locked in. But yeah, it was interesting. You got Venezuelan players in tears on the field last night to maybe being in tears because they realized the season's only just starting. I don't know, but it was incredible to watch the emotions, and I think yes, it gets a lot of us excited for baseball again. Speaking from a Toronto perspective, I think the Jays have been sort of up there when it comes to relevance within the city. It helps that the Leafs don't play well.
Stink.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. So I think once the Jays start next week, the Leafs can be a little further down the news cycle.
Simon, with the Blue Jays season getting ready to kick off, it's just like it's a week away or so. We would imagine that this event would be a springboard, as you mentioned. But that being said, we don't know when the next one of these things is going to happen yet, and with the momentum that it generates, people kind of forget about it.
It's true. I know logistically you can't do this. It's not like how the NHL can take like a 3-week break in the season and do the Olympics. I don't know how you somehow don't figure out some of these guys go into the Olympics. It's in LA in 2028, right? Like, how do you not capitalize on this? You've already got games in the UK. You've got games in other countries. Maybe you figure out a way to like get a mini tournament in. I know the teams won't agree to this. Also, there's not labor peace between the players and baseball, and that's a whole other thing. Maybe that's, the Olympic participation for NHL players is written into the collective bargaining agreement. Maybe players can get that written in for their players. Who knows? We're talking football in the Olympics, and NFL players maybe going to play flag football. Somehow there must be a way we can incorporate the Olympics and baseball into the Olympics, especially with it being in LA next go around here.
Simon, I wouldn't let you off the hook without talking about Toronto Maple Leafs and the ongoing saga that is this Austin Matthews injury and the lack of Maple Leaf reaction to that injury when it happened. It seems to be dogging this team even into this week.
Well, I wonder if maybe they have to work on acquiring your boy Brisson. He can handle himself. There you go. 5 games, by the way. That's a whole other thing. The narrative around here is 1, the injury, 2, the suspension and all that. But the fact that the Leafs did nothing last Thursday on the ice when it happened. What's interesting is, so they had not even close to as serious an incident last night. One of the Islanders brushed past Joseph Woll. It was like a love tap. Morgan Riley's right in there fighting him. And the Islanders broadcast was like, yep, that's a week too late. And Craig Berube was asked about it, the coach, and he's like, well, the message was clearly received. Yeah, how about a week late? But if anything, and I wonder about this, if anything, what happened last Thursday, if you listen to Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts, he said he had heard that Brad Treliving was furious about everything around it. Makes you wonder if there wasn't an appetite for making significant changes, maybe there is now. Maybe that's the single catalyst to something happening, or maybe at least to nothing. Who knows? But the conversation around here is, how did that? I don't know. There's so many things that could happen around the Maple Leafs in the next few weeks. I just want the season to end already.
Simon, appreciate the time, my friend. Go Leafs, go, I think. We'll talk to you soon.
See you, buddy.
Cheers. That is Simon Bennett, our sports guy. You can hear him every morning right here on 95.7 News Radio and in the quarter hours as he brings us up to date on what's going on in the World Baseball Classic. They need to, I think, make this thing at least schedule it, right? We don't know when they're going to happen. We don't know when the next one's going to happen. But this one was certainly a lot of fun. And Canadian baseball, I think, benefits from it because we had a pretty significant showing making the quarterfinals. and losing to the Americans, and not losing by a whole lot to that star-studded team. Time for us to take another break. When we come back, we haven't talked to our Parliament Hill bureau chief for City News for a long time. Cormac MacSweeney is going to pop in as Pierre Poilievre travels, as the Prime Minister travels and goes on vacation, and there's those by-elections that are hanging over the House of Commons, bringing a majority government or not. Cormac knows he's the insider, and he'll join us right after this break. Well, it might be March break, and the politicians in Ottawa have dispersed across the country, but that doesn't mean that there isn't stuff that is happening at the federal level. Of course, we know that the Prime Minister had an audience with the King. He had a conversation at 0800 hours with the Prime Minister of the UK, and that was Keir Starmer at 10 Downing Street. Now I understand he's on vacation somewhere in Europe. I think he's in Italy. But staying abreast of what's happening, of course, world events are changing by the minute. Pierre Poilievre using his March break to travel to the United States. He met with automakers in Michigan. He said that in a release yesterday that he was in Texas yesterday having a conversation with the governor down there, strengthening Canadian ties with the Texas governor, Greg Abbott. Lots going on, even though they're on holidays. And as I booked this next segment today, I didn't realize that it is the day after St. Patrick's Day, and having Cormac MacSweeney join us on the day after St. Patrick's Day is quite a get. Cormac, my apologies, my friend.
That's all right. I took it easy yesterday. Not a problem.
Haven't talked for a long time. How you been?
It's been good, just everything on Parliament Hill is keeping me rather busy. Of course, the last 2 years, it seems like each year I say, how can it get any crazier and busier than the year that just ended? And they keep topping it. So, we got a lot on our plate this year. It's been an interesting one so far, and I'm sure we'll be speaking about more federal issues to come.
For sure. Cormac, the reason why I reached out is we saw late yesterday that the federal government is going to push the court's decision on the use of the Emergency Act into the Supreme Court's realm now. You were there. You were on the ground for us when that whole thing was happening with the Freedom Convoy. I guess the first question's the broad one. Are you surprised that the Carney government, given that this kind of all fell on Justin Trudeau and his administration, is pushing this to the Supreme Court?
I don't think I'm surprised by the fact that it's going to the Supreme Court. I think it was expected, regardless of what the lower courts ruled, it was expected to eventually make its way to the Supreme Court, because we know both sides in this legal fight were not going to give up. It's mainly being challenged by the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, which staunchly disagrees with the way the act was used and the powers that the federal government gets in the act. So let's, take a step back here to 2022. It was actually Valentine's Day in 2022 when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau decided to invoke the act, and thousands of protesters were occupying downtown Ottawa for weeks. There seemed to be a lot of police mismanagement about how to deal with the situation. The province of Ontario was not stepping in any way. And so the federal government, after all of that time, decided this was hitting a point where they needed to step in. They claimed that this was a threat to the security of Canada. There were also borders points being blocked, some key border points being blocked. And so they invoked the act, and it gave them powers such as banning public assemblies in certain areas, which they did. They created a red zone, which my home also fell into that red zone. So you had police checkpoints you had to go through. It was a crazy time. But then also they froze the bank accounts and financial assets of some of the protesters as a way to potentially stop money from flowing in to the protesters so that they could continue on with what they were doing. But all of those things, the lower courts decided were a breach of Canadians' charter rights and the charter rights of the protesters who were down there. In 2024, a federal court rejected the use of the Emergencies Act by the feds. And then just in January, the Federal Court of Appeal upheld that decision. So the feds are really arguing here that those decisions by the lower courts were actually legally flawed. And they say that not only that, but the rulings will hamstring the government's ability to respond to future crises, and they say that it effectively neuters the Emergencies Act. But this is the first time the Emergencies Act was ever used since its creation in the late 80s. It had taken over the War Measures Act, and this is the first test legally of this. So in some ways, it might be good that the Supreme Court is probably going to hear this. You know, it's up to the Supreme Court. The appeal has been made. They have to decide whether they do hear this case or not. I'd be more surprised if they don't hear this case. But nonetheless, if it does hit the Supreme Court, that may be a good thing so that there are more proper legal parameters around what a federal government can or cannot do in the situation of an emergency.
It's a divisive issue, right? I mean, if you go and you talk to people that were in that red zone and had their houses there like you did and had to deal with this protest for all those weeks and the horns and everything else that was associated with that, you will likely get a very strong opinion that the government did the right thing. But you get outside of Ottawa and you get outside of Ontario, and that opinion starts to change a little bit, and people start to suggest that this was an infringement on rights. So you're right. I think this was always destined to go to the Supreme Court. I think it probably should.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rhetoric on both sides of this debate that you hear. Some people, who were impacted by it, claiming things that about the impact that it had on their lives. And then you hear on the opposite side where people said, hey, this was completely peaceful. There was nothing that we did wrong here. I don't know. We don't understand why everyone was upset about this protest. And there will be that debate, I think, forevermore when it comes to it, depending on what side you sort of fall on that one. As you say, I think in some ways it may be a good thing that the Supreme Court is going to weigh in because we are talking about people's charter rights here. And when a government is given the power to go much further than they currently would be allowed to go, there have to be questions and there have to be checks and balances on that in a democratic society like we have. And the courts will have the final say about whether the federal government was right or wrong in invoking the act and whether or not the act as is would be, according to the government, effectively neutered, but whether it goes too far in terms of government powers should there be an emergency situation. I don't want to prejudge what the Supreme Court will specifically rule on, but they could even say whether it amounted to the threshold of calling an emergency or invoking the act in this scenario, because we did have a big public inquiry about it, and a lot of people supportive of the government and the government felt that they did meet that threshold, and then others against it feel like there were other options that could have been taken before sort of going to I don't want to say the nuclear option, but that's essentially it, the final option that the government had.
Cormac, almost at a time, Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition both traveling for a March break, the March break at the House of Commons. The Prime Minister meeting with the Prime Minister of the UK and the King as he continues to try and work on that relationship. And then on vacation. The more curious is the travelings of the Leader of the Official Opposition, who was in Texas yesterday and said that he and Greg Abbott had a discussion about the crucial Canada-Texas partnership and how Canadian energy can fuel both of our economies. Is this normal for a Leader of the Opposition to travel like this?
We've seen leaders of the opposition in the past make international trips. And before the Calgary Conservative Convention, where Polya faced his leadership review, several more senior Conservatives were telling me they think that he should travel and maybe go to a place like the UK. They thought that he was going to avoid the United States, but he decided to go there, although he's avoiding Washington, D.C., saying it's up for the government of Canada to negotiate with the White House. But in this sort of era right now of federal politics, the eyes of the nation are on a lot of stuff that's happening outside of our borders. We've got the White House launching a tariff war with the world. We've got international crises when it comes to, the wars in Ukraine, the war in Iran right now, the global oil prices, all of this impacting Canada, of course. But the fight for our domestic economy is really something that is to be had on the international stage. And so because the Prime Minister, the office of the Prime Minister, has such an advantage in that regard, because they represent our country, and that person, whoever it may be, is the one to try and get deals, to get stuff done on the international stage to help our country here at home, that gives a natural political advantage to whoever holds the office at the time. Right now, it's Prime Minister Mark Carney. And when you're talking about the economy and trade as being the top issues for Canadians, his resume really leans into that as well, being a former central banker for Canada and England. And so the Conservatives have seen their domestic polling go down quite a bit as a result, as much as 16 points, according to the latest Nanos Research poll, right, that they're trailing the Liberals. And so he had to do something to show that he could hack it on the world stage to try and improve his image here at home. And that would be the point of this trip. We'll see in the weeks and months ahead whether it's moved the needle, anything at all for the Conservatives.
Cormac, happy belated St. Patrick's Day. Appreciate your time.
And happy St. Patrick's Day to you guys, too.
That is Cormac MacSweeney, our Parliament Hill bureau chief for CityNews and for news radio across the country, with his look and thoughts on what's happening in Ottawa. Time for us to get a update on the news and what's happening around the world. And when we come back, we haven't spoken with the former host of the Weekend Gardener for quite a long time, and it is getting into that time of the year when we're starting to plan and maybe even start to plant some stuff in our gardens. Niki Jabbour will be joining us for the next 30 minutes. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We are back in minutes. Well, we know that the world is a bit of a crazy place right now, and all of the doom and gloom that is happening with wars and gas prices and inflation, and now the Bank of Canada, as you heard, is keeping its interest rate steady, and a lot of nervousness out there. I know many are looking inward to try and find some solace from all of the stuff that's happening around the world. And as I mentioned before, with energy prices, with gasoline and diesel prices on the rise, and we're certainly going to feel the impact of that at the grocery store. Some of you out there might be considering restarting that COVID garden that you had, right? We all planted gardens, and we're doing our own thing when we're facing those lockdowns, and if vegetable prices get any higher, we may have to resort to doing that again on a larger scale. So this is the time of the year when you start to either start planting some seeds to get them started or planning for the garden for the year. And when I start talking about garden stuff, there's really only one person that I go to for my advice, and I hope that you get some advice from her too as well, the former host of our show here, The Weekend Gardener, and our friend Niki Jabbour. Niki, how are you?
Dan, it's so great to talk to you. I am fantastic. Thank you. And yourself?
Well, it's busy times, and the world's
Indeed.
in a little bit of a crazy spot right now.
Yep, it is indeed. Yes,
But
I know.
The best place for some to get away from all of this stuff is the garden. And this is the time of the year that it's I often refer to spring as Christmas for gardeners, right? It's that anticipation of getting things underneath the tree. And I know, following your website and your social medias, Niki, that you're busy.
Yes, it is. I mean, the midst of seed starting season for indoor seed starting, as many gardeners will know, if you grow food, flowers, or herbs, anything like that. And I'm literally surrounded by grow lights as I talk to you, Dan. I've got things like microgreens growing for, a quick indoor harvest. I've got my peppers and tomatoes coming up. I know you love your homegrown tomatoes, of course. I'm starting salad greens as well. lots of broccoli, cabbage, leeks, onions, all that sort of stuff, even artichokes. So my house is an indoor jungle. I don't think there's one room that doesn't have some sort of grow light in it. But you know what? The season is almost here. The snow has almost melted in my front yard, and the greenhouse today is 25 degrees. So if you want a nice warm place to hang out, come on over.
Oh, boy, with all that vitamin D, careful. I might just take
Yeah,
you up
right?
on that. Niki, kind of was thinking when we started talking about this today was those that are facing the specter perhaps of inflation hitting the grocery store harder than it already has, and maybe looking to knock a dent into their household budget by digging a hole in their backyard and starting a vegetable patch of their own. For somebody that's new or hasn't done it for a long time, what do you recommend, and how big do you recommend they go?
Yeah, I mean, for someone who really hasn't grown food before, smaller is better. You don't want to go too big too quickly, because then it becomes a chore and a burden, and so many things can go awry that it's best to start small and kind of flex your gardening skills, learn some of those skills, and you can always, go bigger next year. A lot of gardeners are starting with raised beds. You can make them, you can just pile up soil to make a raised bed, or you can, border them with, untreated lumber, which of course has also gone up in recent years.
Right.
Or you can use rocks or logs, or, maybe you've got some cinder blocks around your house or old landscape pavers. Anything like that you can use as a border around a raised bed, and you can raise it up, 4 inches, 6 inches, as high as you want. In a raised bed, it's a great way to grow food intensively. There's fewer weeds. There's great drainage. The soil warms up earlier in the spring, so you can plant earlier. It's just a great environment to grow food. So I have 30 raised beds in my backyard. Maybe too many, but, I grow a lot of food for family and friends and such, and the food bank as well. But you certainly can get started. And if you have a very small space, maybe, you just want to start like literally the smallest possible little garden, grow in containers. You can use buckets and, baskets and actual plastic or wooden containers you can buy. If you're going to upcycle something like a bucket, put some drainage holes in the bottom, fill it up with good quality potting mix, and plant your favorite vegetables, because pretty much anything can be grown in a pot. And I know you're a diehard container gardener, Dan.
You bet. Diehard container tomato grower.
That's right. Celebrity being your favorite.
Absolutely. Yeah, but you also hooked me up with the Sun Golds, which I like a lot too. And they're prolific. I'll tell you what, you can't keep up with them. That being said, what I find to be the benefit for container gardening is that you don't have to bend over as much to weed.
So true, right? And the older we get, the more I find that's one of the bigger benefits now, Dan.
Right.
And to be honest, I'm actually going to be probably moving in the next year, so this is probably going to be my last season in this garden
But you just got the garden where you wanted it.
It's been 11 years since I built the new garden, and to be perfectly honest, she's fallen apart a little bit. I mean, wooden raised beds only last for so long. Right. Mine are made from local untreated hemlock, and I wanted 10 years, and here I am in year 11. And yes, they're a little strapped together at this point. Next year will be a whole new garden, a whole new design for me. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'll probably be a little bit smaller than what I currently have, only due to the constrictions of the site. But yeah, you don't need a big place to grow food. And if you're going to grow food, and you want to save money, which we all want to do. I mean, gardeners are notoriously thrifty, myself included. You're thinking, well, how can I actually cut, supermarket prices? So the things that are relatively easy to grow, that are relatively quick to grow, are what we call the high value, cost-effective vegetables. So things like salad greens, leaf lettuce, baby spinach, baby arugula, those baby mixed mesclun greens, all those are really easy to grow in containers and raised beds. And most of them are quick, like 30 to 40 days, from seeding to when you're harvesting those delicious baby greens. So that is one of the things I would recommend growing. Fresh herbs, also expensive to buy, easy to grow in a container or raised bed. And you mentioned cherry tomatoes, Sun Gold, my favorite one, of course. Also a very high value, expensive crop to buy, in the supermarket, but really easy to grow in containers or garden beds. Large fruited tomatoes, a little more fussy, but cherry tomatoes are very reliable. You've also got things like cucumbers that are relatively easy to grow, zucchini. So there's quite a few crops that if you eat them a lot, then you can grow and hopefully cut some of those grocery bills.
And you can grow things vertically too. I'm thinking cucumbers and beans and such that you don't need to have that big, massive footprint.
Oh, you're talking my language, Dan. Yeah, I'm a big vertical grower. I buy sort of like these wire, just mesh panels, which are 4 by 8 foot. Used to get them for like $15. I think they're probably closer to 20 now, but I mount those to the backs of my beds, or I put them in between beds, and I use 2 to make a tunnel. And I'm always growing things vertically, because if you're growing, say, pole beans versus bush beans, you can triple your harvest using the same square footage of garden space. So why wouldn't I try to do that? So pole beans, you can grow them up netting, a fence, like a chain link fence, anything like that. You're just going to get a huge harvest out of pole beans. And not only do you get more food, they produce for a longer period of time. Bush beans produce for about 2 to 3 weeks, whereas pole beans, you're going to get 6 to 8 weeks out of those plants. Yes, again, they grow high, 6 to 8 feet, sometimes more, but for sure, definitely a great way to go, growing vertically. And as you mentioned, cucumbers, also another crop to grow vertically. And I do plant, like, if you really want the most from your garden, I plant cucumbers, once the frost grist has passed in spring, so usually late May. But then I'll plant some more 4 to 6 weeks later, more seeds, and that'll take me even into like September. So succession planting is also a key to high productivity in your garden. So you don't just plant things once. I plant throughout the entire growing season, so I have that nonstop harvest. And one thing I did neglect to mention, Dan, if people do want to grow food, look for the light. I mean, we need plenty of sun. Most crops need at least 6, 8 hours is even better of direct light every day. So if you're dealing with more shade, maybe just 2 or 3 hours of direct light every day, it's more challenging. And I would stick to things like, basically think green. Leafy greens like lettuce and spinach, kale, Swiss chard, they'll do okay in less light. They won't be as productive, but they'll still do okay. But anything like that needs to produce a fruit, like a tomato or a pepper, is just not going to give you, very much in terms of a harvest if you're growing them in low light.
Like me, they like the sun.
Exactly.
Niki's going to stick around. We're going to take a break. Niki's going to stick around. We'll ask her about companion gardening, and when we come back, we'll also ask her about the craze that is heirloom tomatoes and heirloom seeds and seed libraries you can keep so you don't have to keep going back to the gardening center. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. She's Niki Jabbour. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We are back after this break. St. Patrick's Day, Sheila's brush, the first robin that I saw on TV last night, and gardeners start planting their seeds, all signs of spring. And I know that Niki's been kind of ahead of the game there. She's got all kinds of things started. Niki, before the break, we said that we were going to talk a little bit about companion gardening. It's important that we don't just focus on one crop, right? We need to kind of think about the way that we lay out our garden so that one crop kind of benefits the other.
Yeah, totally true. I mean, like companion planting is basically just pairing plants together for some benefit. And usually for me, that's bringing in the bees, because the more bees and beneficial insects like ladybugs or lacewings that I can introduce to my garden, the better it is for me, because bees will pollinate crops that need to be pollinated, like cucumbers and squash and pumpkins and stuff like that, melons, whereas the beneficial insects like ladybugs are going to munch on the garden bad guys like aphids. So it just helps create a healthier ecosystem. And I think most of us who grow food are, at this point anyway, are organic gardeners. So it's all about feeding the soil, making sure the plants have the nutrients they need, lots of light. And again, it doesn't have to be that hard. If you don't have a big garden, start in containers.
Niki, heirloom seeds and seed libraries. Yeah. A lot of people are trying to save some money, right? And heirlooms are a way to go because they've been around forever and they work.
Yeah, and you can save your seeds from year to year, especially for things that are self-pollinating crops like your tomato, your heirloom tomatoes, if you're growing those, like, Brandywine is a very popular one, Big Rainbow, pineapple. These are incredible heirloom tomatoes. Costaludo. You can save your seeds every year so you don't have to buy new tomato seeds from season to season, which is great. Same goes for lots of other types of heirloom seeds. And in Nova Scotia, across Canada, but in Nova Scotia in particular, we have so many incredible locally owned, seed companies where they're growing the plants for the seeds that they're saving in Nova Scotia. So they're, adapted to our local environment, our local climate. So, I guess I can buy a Brandywine tomato, from someone in the Valley or Truro or somewhere else in Nova Scotia, or I can buy one from California. But that Brandywine tomato seed, even though it's the same type of tomato, is going to do better if it's coming from my own area. So buying locally owned seeds or locally grown seeds is super important for success. And, we have all these Seedy Saturday events, in Nova Scotia and across Canada throughout the spring season. And I'm going to be actually talking at one in St. Margaret's Bay this weekend. It's my only public talk. It's a free talk this weekend. I think I go on the stage at maybe 10:15. And but people can look up Seedy Saturday. Just go to seeds.ca/events. seeds.ca/events, and you'll see ones. There's like New Glasgow and Truro and, downtown Halifax. There's lots of these, and you can meet and talk to the people that are growing and saving the seeds.
You mentioned feeding the soil, Niki. Of course, many people fertilize their containers or their gardens or so on and so forth. But with the push towards keeping things organic and to keeping some of the bad chemicals and pesticides and such out of our gardens for the benefit of our family's health, what do you recommend when it comes to fertilizers for vegetable gardens?
You can buy some all-purpose organic fertilizers, like granular stuff that, again, completely organic, made from like rock-type materials, even things, like plant-based materials. You've got like bone meals, things like this that are incorporated into these complete organic fertilizers. So I usually use a complete organic vegetable fertilizer when I plant my garden, when I'm putting my tomatoes in the ground. I also amend my soil with compost or, rotted manure, which it's usually my Mother's Day gift every year, Dan. You should talk about this in the show. Big truckload of manure, 12 cubic yards coming to my driveway.
Wow.
It's a beautiful thing.
Romance is not dead.
It is not, right? And so that's a great way to feed your soil, because I'm trying to feed the microbes, the microorganisms, the worms that are in my soil. They're the ones breaking down these fertilizers to make those nutrients available to my plants. So I have to keep those guys happy. And if I'm keeping them happy, my plants are going to be healthier. So, but then you can also supplement, with liquid organic fertilizers, especially for growing things in, containers like tomatoes. I'll then use a liquid organic fertilizer every 3 to 4 weeks during the growing season as a supplement, something like a fish emulsion fertilizer, liquid seaweed. And they don't smell so good, but they work great. And we even have some of them made locally in the Maritimes. Sea Boost is a liquid kelp that you can buy locally. That's, again, made locally. So that's always nice, and it works fantastic.
And last, certainly not least, Niki, we know that we live in an area where we share space with our friends, the white-tailed deer.
Do we?
I know that you have had in the past struggles with the critters coming to visit your vegetable patch, and I know many people here in my neighborhood, they have their lilies out in their yards, and they have to put cages over them to keep the animals out of them. What is the best solution to deal with the deer? Yeah,
in my vegetable garden, it is surrounded by a deer fence because I'm on a deer superhighway. There's so many strategies you can use to deal with the deer. If you're talking about ornamental shrubs and perennials like the lilies and the hydrangeas, which they adore, the hosta plants, you want to keep them away from, you can buy some organic sprays that basically leave a bitter flavor on the leaves of the plants. So if they do take a bite, it just tastes terrible. They're usually made of like rotten garlic and rotten eggs, so they also don't smell so great. But if you apply those regularly, they will stop the deer from browsing in your garden. For a food garden, it's all about barriers, putting up fencing. You can buy deer netting, 7 foot tall, which generally works pretty well. Electric deer fencing also works very well. A wooden fence is fantastic, but my goodness, the cost of building a wooden fence at this point is very expensive, and I'm always trying to think of ways to save money in the garden. So again, barriers work well. Also, having like things that deer don't like to walk on. They don't like to walk on like pebbles and rocks and gravel. So if you have that as even like around your garden, I know people in Lunenburg County that don't have fences and they have like 6 foot wide gravel that surround their gardens, and the deer walk on it, don't like it, and they don't actually go into the garden. So there's many different strategies you can use. Some people use things that squirt water at the deer, make loud noises, or, scent things like using Irish Spring, but I haven't found those to be all that effective. So a barrier is really the top way to go to prevent deer damage.
You mentioned nets, and we're almost out of time, but I also see a lot of my neighbors putting nets up over their gardens to keep the birds out. What do you recommend to keep, particularly if you're growing a berry crop or something along those lines?
Yeah, if you got blueberries, if you got certain berries, cherries, like things like this, dwarf cherry trees, using bird netting, and you can buy it anywhere. It works really, really well, to prevent all that crop. They'll wait till they're perfectly ripe and you want them, and then you'll go out that day to harvest and they'll be all gone. So using nettings, which can be draped over the plants directly, or you can, set up some sort of like cage or support around the plants, or even hoops or something to float those nets over. Makes it a little easier for you when you want to harvest. But yeah, that works great. I don't mind sharing some with the birds, but I do want some myself. So netting is definitely a solution for that.
Niki obviously is the one of the foremost authorities on gardening in our part of the world. If you want to find out more about what you're doing, Niki, and some tips and hints and little tricks, where's the best place to connect up with you?
Well, my website is Savvy Gardening, as it has been for many years, 15 years, oh my gosh. And also I've been posting to YouTube new videos several times a week. So YouTube channel is just Niki Jabbour. Of course, Instagram and Facebook. And that's where you can find me again, Niki Jabbour. And Dan, it's so lovely to talk to you.
It was a lot of fun. It brings back a lot of memories, Niki. And all the best of the spring season to you. And I'm sure that once you hang up the phone, you're heading to that greenhouse to enjoy that 25 degrees.
You can read my mind. I'm heading up there now. And thank you, Dan. Everybody have a great rest of your week.
It's afternoon, so it's okay to have a glass of red wine now.
You say so.
All right, thanks, Niki.
I'm going to take that.
All right. Niki Jabbour, Savvy Gardener is her website. And I'm telling you what, there's all kinds of information on there. If you're looking at perhaps getting back into gardening or maybe growing your garden with the cost of living on its increase, it's a way we can put a dent into our food bills. Celebrity tomatoes in containers or Sun Gold tomatoes in containers. That's what I do. And I'll tell you what, if you look after them, if you follow the advice that Niki Jabbour just told you, you'll have more than you can deal with, which is a good problem to have given the price of tomatoes these days. Time for us to take a break. When we come back, we're going to open up the telephone lines for the open hour. But first, we'll have a conversation with our friend Clinton Wilkins. The Bank of Canada has decided to hold its interest rate steady. We'll find out what that means for us heading into the spring market when it comes to housing and what it means for your mortgage. Clinton Wilkins, then the open hour. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We are back in minutes. It is Wednesday, and traditionally it is time for the open hour, and that is in fact the case, folks. We're going to open up the telephone lines right now, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. We're going to do the open hour for the next 60 minutes, but before we get to that, of course, the breaking news today came from the Bank of Canada as we continue to watch what's happening south of the border with the Fed, but the Canadian Bank of Canada has made its decision on interest rates, keeping it, was it 2.25%. And a hold for the next 3 months. And when these things happen, of course, we go to our authority on the mortgage market. And that is, of course, our friend and host of Mortgage 101. That's Clinton Wilkins. And he's in studio today. Buddy, how are you?
Thanks for having me, Dan. Happy Wednesday.
Not a surprise?
Not a surprise for me. I mean, there was a lot of things that we were watching, though. And we actually put a poll internally for our team. And, some people thought there might be a decrease. Majority of people thought there was going to be a hold. For me, seeing the inflation numbers yesterday, I think they came out at 1.9%. Yeah. Job numbers very, very soft in Canada. I think there's a business case.
Lost 81,000 jobs.
It's a lot. And, maybe there's even more because I think some of that data, it takes time to actually come through. There's a business case to lower the key overnight rate. And, no one really wants to talk about the R word, recession, but, we're here. I think the big concern is what's going on with oil, war times. That's going to impact everything if we start seeing oil continue to stay high and maybe even go higher. So I think the Bank of Canada is not a first mover. Macklem, is not making these first decisions. He's waiting for more data to come in. I think it's really, we're going to watch and see. Obviously, we're going to continue to watch the GDP, job numbers, inflation, and the Fed in the U.S., they're having their announcement here later this afternoon, so we're going to be watching that. I guess you saw a poll here, and
it's pretty significantly leaning one way that they're going to hold as well.
They're going to hold. So I think that we need to be cautiously optimistic. Right now, we're in a plateau situation. If we have a recession in Canada, there's a great chance that the Bank of Canada will lower the key overnight rate, but they need to take into account. It's not just everything else that's going into inflation. Fuel prices is going to have an impact for sure.
Clinton, I continually see stories I think I might even have seen one last night about housing prices across the country. The market is depressed in Western Canada, in Upper Canada, and people are worried that they're not going to be able to get the same amount of value out of their home that perhaps that they purchased. You and I have talked about this on Mortgage 101 a couple of different times. You say that's not happening here, at least not yet.
I can tell you what's happening in Ontario and BC is not happening here in Halifax and across Atlantic Canada. If anything, the opposite's happening. Our home prices are going up. It's a story of supply and demand. We have more demand here in the marketplace than we have home starts. And even home starts across the country are way, way down. People are not building homes because the values are less. There's some areas in Ontario, they're seeing like 25% decreases in where the home prices were from the peak. And, maybe those home prices may slide a little bit more. If people need to sell their house for whatever reason, it's a kind of a race to the bottom. It's what is a willing seller and a willing buyer to meet. And that's what the real true value is. Here, we just don't have the inventory to support the demand. But that being said, we're almost spring. We're 2 or 3 days away from spring. Typically, we see a huge, upstart in the amount of listings that's happening here in Halifax and across Atlantic. So in the coming days, I would say by next week, we're going to see a ton of new listings on. I'm cautiously optimistic it's going to be a good spring market. Our market here, we had a realtor on our show just this month, and we have a more balanced market. So it's balanced between sellers and balanced between buyers. And I think that's a better place to be. It's a lot easier to, transact in that type of marketplace. I think some people had some fatigue, during the COVID times when there was 20 plus offers on some of these homes. It becomes too challenging to do the transaction. And I think it creates a lot more risk for both sides of the transaction as well.
A hold with the Bank of Canada, Clinton, 2.25%. What does that mean for people's mortgages? We'll start with people with a variable mortgage.
That means that there's not going to be a change. So if you have a variable mortgage that has an adjustable payment, no change to your payment. If you have the type of variable mortgage that your amortization changes, there's not going to be a change. So that cost of borrowing is going to stay the same. The Bank of Canada is meeting again at the end of April. So obviously a lot can change between, here middle of March to the end of April. In the next 6 weeks, it's almost like a reality show. Expect the unexpected. We're going to continue to watch it. We're going to have another show for Mortgage 101 as well. And, we'll report the news on what happens between now and then.
For sure.
For me, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't want job losses. I want people to be employed in Canada. But I think that's going to be one of these big triggers that we're going to continue to watch.
Clinton, you and I were discussing several weeks ago now, even as this conflict in Iran started to happen, and we saw the immediate increase in oil prices and so on and so forth. But we were also talking about fixed mortgages in the bond market because the fixed mortgages live in the bond market.
Well, it's going the opposite direction, really.
Right.
So we've actually seen some increases even this week in the cost of fixed rate mortgages. That's just the reality. And I think the popularity of a fixed rate mortgage in some cases is actually decreasing. We did a ton of 3-year fixed here even like a year ago. But that really started shifting when the Bank of Canada started lowering the key overnight rate. Yes, right now we're in a plateau situation. People can plan for a plateau, which is fine. And I think there's just so many upsides to a variable rate mortgage. You can always convert into a fixed. And if you needed to break that variable rate mortgage early, it's going to be a penalty of only 3 months interest. So there's certainly a lot of reasons why a variable has become more attractive. And, it's not for everybody. You have to have that risk appetite to, want to have, potentially have that upside. But a variable rate mortgage right now is typically much cheaper than what we would see in a fixed rate mortgage. And I would say we're going to continue to see the divide between where the pricing is on variable and fixed probably increase even more over the next few weeks.
The last time you and I chatted, we were just on the cusp of having the news of a change here in Nova Scotia with regards to down payments and the credit union plan that the government announced at 2%. Down payment to try and spur some people into the market or to get back into the market. We've had a couple of weeks now to digest it. What are you hearing in the community, and what are you hearing in the realty market?
I've definitely heard a lot of rumblings. Let me tell you. I can even tell you we chatted with some people who work in the credit unions, and they're seeing inquiries coming in, but they're not seeing real live applications. So again, some of this stuff is a news bite. We're part of the media. We're reporting on what's going on in housing and mortgage and, the economy. But I don't know if these transactions are going to actually come to fruition. Part of the reason is the pricing piece. So people see what the pricing looks like for a credit union at a 2% down deal or 5% with a high ratio insured mortgage from a traditional lender. And sometimes it really does just come down to, the price point. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think for me, it's restrictive, and I think it's a little bit anti-competitive that, it's only credit unions that are going to have access to this program. I think we'll know more in a few months. Going into the spring market, we're going to see more. For me, I'm okay with it. We do deal with credit unions. I'm not sure how many transactions we're going to physically do ourselves because the bulk of the mortgages that are being done in Nova Scotia, I will venture to say about 99% are not being done by credit unions. So certainly there's a place for credit unions, and I think there could be a place for this program. But for me, I would rather see the province of Nova Scotia invest more into the down payment assistance program. That worked very well, and that was balanced and fair for all lenders, insurers, and really customers across the province. I would rather see them invest more money into that program.
You can hear Clinton on Mortgage 101 every month here on the show, and you can also pick up the back catalog of his programs, I guess our programs, on our website at halifax.citynews.ca. And if you want more information from Clinton, where can we reach you, Clinton?
The best place to find us is online at teamclinton.ca/radio. We have hundreds of blog posts on there. You can see what Dan and I look like on social media, and we're also on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where you may want to listen to your podcast. We break our show up into little weekly bits, and we're having it on podcast platforms, so you can certainly listen to us there as well.
Thanks for coming in, pal.
Thanks for having me.
Clinton Wilkins, our mortgage guru. We're going to stop, take a break. The lines are open now, folks. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The Mid-Week Meltdown, right after the break. All right, welcome back. It's time for the Midweek Meltdown Open Hour. Lines are open, folks. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Certainly lots of things that are talkers out there today. And, of course, the regular rules apply. You can bring anything to the air that you'd like to. We'll certainly have a listen. And something we've talked about, maybe something we haven't talked about, and something you wanted to shine a spotlight on, here's your opportunity to do that. Again, that number is 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Off the top of the show today, I asked you a pretty specific question about Premier Tim Houston and his popularity. New poll released this morning from Angus Reid showing that Tim Houston has seen a significant drop in popularity in this quarter. The Angus Reid releasing the numbers today showing that Tim Houston has seen an 11% drop in approval rating. He's now at 39%. That's the biggest drop amongst all the premiers in the country. We've seen Bob Canoe continues to be really popular in Manitoba. He's at 61%. Susan Holt, now this was taken before yesterday's budget, was at 54%. But Tim Houston is a long way from there, dropping. He was always in the top 2 or 3 since this last group of premiers was polled on, and he has seen an 11-point drop in popularity in the wake of the Blizzard budget, and of course the cuts, and then the reversal of some of those cuts. My question to you, and the lines are open for you to answer, is: has your opinion of Tim Houston changed given the recent events with the province's finances? It certainly has dropped a lot with the people that Angus Reid spoke to, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. Has your opinion of Premier Houston changed? He won a supermajority in the last election. Now, I don't think that's in the cards at this point. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Also, across the border in New Brunswick, Premier Holt, who is the second, by the way, most popular premier in Canada, released their budget, $1.4 billion in deficit on a smaller population than ours, which is quite significant. Some job cuts there to the public service, but one of the nuggets that I picked out, and you saw it on the news last night if you watch the Supper Time News Hour, was that the province of New Brunswick will now institute tolls on its highway connection to Nova Scotia. Anybody with an out-of-province license plate, that other than New Brunswick, will be charged a toll when they cross over either into or out of Nova Scotia. The curious part of this to me is that the province of New Brunswick has 2 additional border crossings within its borders. One of them is at the Quebec border, and the finance minister for the province of New Brunswick yesterday explained that one by saying that there is some kind of federal legislation that prevents them from putting a toll on. They have to negotiate with the federal government in order to put a toll on that highway, which is interesting. And the other interesting point is that New Brunswick has a border crossing with Maine at St. Stephen. No toll there. So it leads me to believe, and I say this again, as I mentioned off the top of the show with a little tongue-in-cheek, given that I lived in New Brunswick for 6 years and did the radio there in Moncton for that time. But it makes me wonder if New Brunswick is trying to capitalize on its reputation as being the drive-through province, right? That has been dogging the province of New Brunswick for some time. That people will make it as far, if they're traveling across the country, will make it as far as Quebec, and then they will either stay in Quebec and then travel all the way through New Brunswick without stopping to get to Nova Scotia or to PEI. Same with American tourists that are coming into our part of the world. They will stay in Nova Scotia and then they will blast across into Quebec and just kind of skip New Brunswick. Your thoughts on tolls on the highways? I don't know what the toll is. I haven't been able to find that number yet. It may exist. I just haven't seen it. But are you willing to pay a toll to travel into New Brunswick now? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We'll go to the phones and we will say hello to Carl. Carl, how are you?
Not too bad, Dan. How about yourself?
I am well, sir. What's on your mind?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not here to talk about politics or anything. As a matter of fact, I want to talk a little nostalgia. Years ago, John Gilbert, and he used to have a show back then. It was called Action Line.
Okay.
And he used to do a segment on the open segment, and it was called A Bouquet of Roses or A Pie in the Face.
Okay.
And it used to be quite a bit of fun. It was nice to see it come back as a nostalgia thing. But anyways, the first bouquet I'd like to send out is to your staff and yourself, for you as well, for being as knowledgeable on as many subjects as you are. Sometimes you blow me away.
Well, sometimes I'm wrong too, and people will tell me that real quick.
Anyways, the second one I want to do, if I can start it off, the first one I want to send is A Bouquet of Roses.
Okay.
I live in the Timberley area, and I had to drive into Bears Lake Park in the height of that storm yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, I mean, your car doors, you had to fight to close them. You had to fight with it to keep it from blowing off the hinges. And on my way in the St. Margaret's Bay Road, the people that decided to put their blue bags and stuff out, they were everywhere. They were over on the opposite side of the road where there was no houses, up against guardrails and everything. And when I came back through, I ran into the truck. He had already come part way through. And when I passed the truck and went by him, you would not even know it was garbage day.
There you go.
These guys, normally they'll jump on the truck, they'll ride along a little bit, jump off, do a couple of houses, then drive along a little farther. I don't think they spent a minute off the truck because they were picking up blue bags everywhere, and you wouldn't have even thought it was garbage day. So I want to throw out a bouquet of roses to the guys out in our area anyways that were doing this job. It's nothing that anybody really talks about, but it's something that should be recognized.
Carl, I appreciate that. It's nice to hear some good news every once in a while.
Well, like I say, if you should, and I'll tell you, by doing the bouquet of roses and that, sometimes you get people that actually phone up and say nice things for a change.
There you go. I appreciate it, Carl. Have a fantastic day.
All right, bud.
That's interesting. John Gilbert, Carl obviously goes back a ways. I had to look it up. Okay. John, I remember John Gilbert at Chum in Toronto, and that would have been in the early 80s, I do believe. He had a late night show. I don't remember what it was called. It was nationwide. Anyway, he was over there at CJCH, Rick Howe's stomping grounds in the early 70s. So we have done that in the past. We have done, I think we used to call it darts and laurels, where you could either throw a dart or you could spread some laurels on people, and it was a lot of fun. Maybe maybe something that we will consider. I'm looking at Vanessa with a raised brow, and that maybe we'll consider to do something like that in the not too distant future. It is good every once in a while to have some positivity in the world that is extremely negative these days, is it not? It's we did it just before Christmas. We did one, didn't we, Vanessa? I think, yeah, and it was a lot of fun. We'll keep that one in mind, Carl, and I appreciate it. And thank you for saying nice things. It's wonderful, to be honest. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That all being said, this is the Midweek Meltdown, folks. Your chance to say something nice or maybe not so nice about those in power or in that have maybe got under your skin. It's a world that is just full of negativity these days, and the Premier is feeling that with that 11-point slide in the polls. I'm to be honest, am surprised. Tim Houston, I thought, was going to just ride this majority into another one, but with a slide that significant, and albeit, and I'll say it, polls are polls. An 11-point drop in popularity is a pretty tough pill to swallow, and many were asking questions about why the Premier decided to reverse course on some of those cuts and apologize. Just take a look at those polling numbers. Politicians tend to flow with the way the winds blow, and I say it here a lot. And I think that your sticking up for your province certainly affected change on that. Time for us to take a break for the news. The open hour, the Midweek Meltdown continues on the other side. You're listening to The Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Back in minutes. Welcome back. Midweek Meltdown continues here on the program. Lots of lines open, folks, if you want to get in to discuss the issues of the day or whatever it is on your mind. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Thanks to the caller who called during the news break to tell us that it's National Transit Drivers and Workers. Is that what it is? Transit Driver Appreciation Day today. It's part of the week of celebrations for those that work in the transit industry. And we know those bus drivers are out there driving us to and from where we got to go, and sometimes under the less than ideal circumstances, I will say. So if it's your day and you're celebrating it, we'll celebrate right along with you. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. It's interesting that day is right after St. Patrick's Day. I wonder if there's a correlation there, having to deal with perhaps some of the St. Patrick's Day revelers last evening. It's appropriate to have an appreciation day today. I don't know if that's still a thing, but it certainly got lots of national attention. Hello, Lori.
Hi.
What's on your mind?
I was just wondering, has anyone ever asked Tim Houston, when he was thinking about the cuts, why he didn't start at the top with his own department and himself and work the way down, rather than just starting with all the workers and the people at the bottom who do all the work, instead of, it just seems so frustrating that this is what politicians tend to do. And I guess the other thing is benefits that all the politicians get, the car allowance, all the bonuses and the benefits and the salaries. How did that ever get so out of control? Right.
No, I don't have the answer for that one, Lori, but they certainly do. They get car allowances and rental allowances and office staff and expense accounts and so on and so forth.
Food allowances, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. No,
yeah. I mean, there's so much that can be cut there, and yet, you've got these poor workers that are sometimes doing 2 and 3 jobs because they can't exist on what they're getting.
I hear you. Thanks, Lori.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Caught part of a conversation around the water cooler yesterday, talking about the budget and the situation and the $1.3 billion deficit that we are facing, and that conversation was leading towards kind of what Lori was talking about, and we tend to look at the front lines and the services and the fees that taxpayers pay, but there's never been a whole lot of attention paid to if we're getting value for money for the number of politicians that we have, right? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when a new riding was formed up in Cheticamp, up in Cape Breton, and we're adding another MLA to the mix. And I know many of you have reached out to me in the past and emails and on telephone calls saying that we have too many MLAs in Nova Scotia. I think it would be an interesting study, and I don't think that the government should be the one that does the study. I think this needs to be an arm's length or maybe even an academic study to take a look at the number of politicians that we have here in Nova Scotia, be it or maybe at all three levels of government, right? Do we have too many councillors? Do we have too many MLAs? Do we have too many MPs? Because to Laurie's point, it's not just the salary, the $100,000 or $109,000, whatever it is, that is the base salary. It's all the perks and all the benefits and all the other things, and the staff and the ministries and all those kind of things. I don't suggest the government should study itself because, to Laurie's point, they never do look real closely at making cuts to their upper echelons. But maybe it's time that we get a study done on things from an academic level even, and take a look at our representation and if we're getting value for our dollars. Hello, Tanya.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Great. I just wanted to call, and unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit negative.
Well, that's okay. It happens here.
It does. And I just wanted to state that over the past couple weeks and prior to the winter as well, I've noticed several HRM vehicles, like the ones used by City Fields, City Works, whatever you call it now. Yep. They leave the vehicles running and nobody in them.
Really?
Yesterday I saw one in my subdivision, and they were visiting somebody and had the HRM Ford F-150 running, lights on, wipers on for a good 20 minutes.
With nobody in it?
Now, who's paying for that? Nobody in it. They were visiting their parents.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I kid you not.
Wow.
I can barely afford to fill my tank.
Well, it was $136 to fill mine yesterday.
Oh, my God. It's ridiculous.
Yep.
Like, someone at HRM, please talk to your people and ask them to use some common sense.
Thanks, Tanya. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Not to mention that HRP highly recommends against doing that. It's easy to steal a truck. I get it that it's a logoed vehicle and I don't know how far you'd get with it, but we've seen people take fire trucks and buses in the past, so why leave your vehicle running? That just seems just very wasteful. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Dan. How are you?
I am well. What's on your mind?
I've got a positive statement here I wanted to call you about, and I've decided to do it today. Mr. Murphy, who you have on as a guest once in a while, who did the CTV news for the longest time, they needed a replacement for him after he left, and they searched around, and boy, did they find an ideal one in Todd Battis.
You like Todd, do you?
Well, I don't see why anybody would like him.
I'm not suggesting I don't. I'm just saying that you like Todd.
I like him a lot. I mean, it's a big shoe to fill when you got to replace Steve Murphy, and Todd Battis comes on there. He is impeccable in his dress and of course his professionalism and his interviews. He does such a marvelous job, and I watch the way men dress, and the tie is never crooked. Everything's in place, and the way he does his interviews are like second to Steve Murphy, because I always thought Steve Murphy was the best. Yes, and in addition to Todd, is right beside him is Kalen Mitchell, who replaced, I think, Cindy Day.
He did.
Two icons in our community was Steve Murphy and Cindy Day, and in comes Kalen Mitchell, and Kalen Mitchell is second to nobody, too, and doing the weather. I think they both do an excellent job. And he's another guy that's always dressed right to the hilt. And I sort of think the way Todd dresses and Kalen dresses, it spreads around through the community of CTV, because I know, I'm not mentioning any names, but some of those guys in New Brunswick, they'd come on TV with a T-shirt and a scruffy beard. And not since Todd was there, I think he straightened them people out to put some sort of jacket on and tie. Some of those guys in New Brunswick were pretty sloppy. But I thought I'd say something positive about Todd and Kaylin, and they are doing an excellent job. And I like the way they dress. I like the way they present themselves on the CTV News.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Todd did have a heck of a tie on last night, didn't he? We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. Midweek Meltdown continues. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the number if you want to join the show. Lots of lines are open. You can talk about whatever it is on your mind. That's the beauty of open line radio. Let's welcome Paul to the show. Paul, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, Stan.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on, of course, we always hear this when there's a storm, how Nova Scotia Power has to cut back the trees and all this, right? And I just want to give some of your listeners some insight.
Sure.
I actually work for a traffic control company, or a couple of them, and 50% of what I did had to do with traffic control surrounding basically cutting trees around lines, replacing poles, and everything. And that was for 2 years. And I don't see how much more the Power Corporation could really do, because storms happen, and right now they're down to about 100 customers that are without power right now. I think that's pretty good considering it was only 25,000 yesterday.
Right. No, and I looked just not that long ago, and it's less than that now. So they've got it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But I mean, no, I mean, I was doing the winter, summer, spring, fall, and 50% of the clients that I was going to do traffic control were either taking out poles, replacing transformers, the trees. Then there was the Department of Highways, basically buzzsawing everything along, off of the shoulder and so on. So when David complains about this, which I know he will, I think, be 2 years in my shoes and have and listen to that, because, what reality is and what, people imagine, are two different things.
Fair point, Paul. I appreciate the call.
Thanks.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255 to the email bag. And we were talking earlier about the slip in the polls that we're seeing now with Tim Houston in popularity and approval rating. If you're just joining the show and you haven't seen it or heard it, Premier Houston, in an Angus Reid survey that was released this morning, sliding 11 points to 39% support. Well, I shouldn't say support, popularity in this latest survey. And, of course, that comes in the wake of the budget, and then the budget cuts, and then the budget cut reversals. I've asked the question today if you've lost or your opinion has changed in Premier Houston. Got an email from Phil, and it reads, "Hey, Dan, I've leaned left politically for a long time, and I was starting to think Houston seemed capable and had things under control. I understand the world's different now, with wars, tariffs, and other pressures, so it makes sense that the budget might be in deficit. But what we saw from the PC party felt pretty unprofessional. There were a lot of cuts across the board that came across lacking of empathy for people. Even though he later reversed some decisions and asked for forgiveness, saying it was a series of mistakes, it still felt like poor judgment and lack of thought. At this point, Phil writes that he's no longer a fan of Tim." 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. When it comes to the budget question, folks, and I know nobody really wants to talk about this because you don't like to pay tax. I don't like to pay tax. Vanessa doesn't like to pay tax. I'm going to suggest that you will have to look very, very, very long time to find somebody that will agree to that they like to pay tax. But if you look at the budgets of the provinces that we've seen so far this year, right? Even Alberta, BC, and closer to home here in Nova Scotia and in New Brunswick. Nova Scotia is at $1.3 billion in deficit. New Brunswick, $1.4 billion. With most of the provinces showing billion-dollar deficits in spending. Let me ask you this question, and it's probably not fair considering that we don't have much time left, but let me ask you this question. Maybe you can chew on it for the open hour tomorrow, which we'll do at 11 o'clock. But is it time that we take a look at how and how much revenue is generated in the province? Now, the Premier of Nova Scotia will say, well, I'm working on that, Dan. I'm building these grandiose wind farms and the royalties associated with that. We're talking about hydrogen exportation up in Member 2, and we're talking wind farm generation and so on and so forth. But if this is a systemic problem right across the provinces of Canada, and again, I'll put the caveat on this, that nobody wants to pay more tax, me included, but the model seems broken. We talk about spending, we talk about mismanagement of funds, we talk about wasteful dollars being thrown out the door on things that we or you don't consider to be important. But a lot of times those items will end up being a very small amount of the overall budget. If a business is seeing more expense than revenue generated, and I get it, businesses would look internally to try and reduce expenses. I think there's a lot of companies that are doing that these days, and that usually means humans. But they would also look at raising their prices, would they not? And are we to the point where, and it's political suicide, but are we to the point where 14% or 15% or whatever it is HST that we're paying in Atlantic Canada isn't enough? I don't know what the answer is, but it just seems that this isn't just an Atlantic Canada problem. These billion-dollar deficits are happening right across the country, including in the richer have provinces. Politicians will never discuss it because it's, again, political suicide. But just want you to think about it. Do we need to revisit? I'll say it. Do taxes need to rise? Because we're just not bringing enough money in to cover what we want as services as Nova Scotians or as Atlantic Canadians or as Haligonians or Dartmouthians or whomever. Just something for you to chew on for the open hour tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Thursday edition of the program, folks. That means that, of course, we will do the open hour. That's going to happen at 11 o'clock. We've got lots of things planned for you as part of our broadcast on the show tomorrow. We're going to keep an eye, of course, on what's going on in the Middle East. I'm looking at gasoline prices, and I certainly will not suggest that I completely understand how the Energy Board sets gasoline prices and interrupter clauses, but gas is up almost 4% at one point today. Are we going to see another interrupter clause? Are we going to see a continual rise in gasoline and diesel prices? What does that mean at the grocery store? Canada's food inflation rate slowing last month, but those numbers, to be quite honest, are useless because the war started on the 28th of February. And the gas prices have gone up since. I'm going to suggest we're going to see a big jump in inflation next month. Bank of Canada holding its rate steady this month. Sylvain Charlebois is going to join us tomorrow and tell us a little bit about food inflation and what he expects to see happen at the grocery store. Premier Houston seeing an 11-point slide in his popularity reading. That could be good news for Claudia Chender and the NDP. Claudia will join us as part of the program. And we're going to talk a little bit about one of the contentious things that came up during the budget, and that was the elimination of the tolls on the bridges. Part of that process saw that Halifax Harbour Bridges to be absorbed into a provincial entity. And now concern from members of Regional Council and longtime serving members of the Bridge Commission about a lack of political oversight now, because this organization is essentially a Crown corporation. District 2 Councillor David Hensby will be on the program tomorrow to talk to us a little bit about that as well. And we're going to talk to an Oscar winner. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you can join us again tomorrow. My thanks to all of you who dialed the numbers and joined the program. I truly appreciate it. Thanks to all of our guests who took time out of their busy schedules to join the show and impart us with their knowledge. I learned something, and I hope that you did as well, in absolutely the biggest laurels that I can find for Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass, who puts these things together and has to pivot very quickly some days, more often than not, to fill holes. And we do appreciate it. Cannot do the show without her and her support here on the program. It's a sunny day. It's a little cool, but the wind seems to be behind us, and we are still in March break, and I'm jealous for all of you that are on your break. Enjoy. Get out there and enjoy what Nova Scotia has to offer. I say it a lot. We're so very lucky to live where we do, despite all of the bumps and bruises that we have and potholes. It's still a wonderful place to live, and people pay thousands of dollars to come here just to see it. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Get out there, touch some grass, take a walk, say hello to your neighbor, and when you do so, remember to be kind.